He retired on a Friday. By Monday morning, he was in the garage reorganizing tools he had already organized the week before, not because they needed reorganizing, not because he had a project waiting, just because standing still felt wrong in a way he could not quite name. His wife watched from the kitchen window and said nothing. She had seen this before, not in him, in her own father, 20 years earlier. The same restlessness, the same hands that needed to be doing something, the same expression that appeared whenever the house got too quiet and there was nothing left to fix. Guarded. This video is not about workaholism. It is not about men and women who love their careers so much they cannot leave them behind. It is about something quieter and more fundamental than that. It is about a generation that was taught, not in classrooms, not in books, but through the daily texture of the world they grew up in, that your worth is what you produce, that rest is something you earn, not something you are allowed to simply take, and that the moment you stop being useful, something essential about who you are begins to disappear. If you have ever caught yourself inventing tasks on a Sunday afternoon, if you have ever felt a low hum of guilt while sitting still, if retirement has brought you not relief but a strange and unsettling quiet you were not prepared for, this is about you. There is a question that follows baby boomers into retirement that almost nobody asks out loud. Not what will I do with my time, that one gets asked plenty. The question underneath that one, the one that sits heavier and goes unspoken, is this: if I am no longer the person who does things, who provides things, who shows up and handles things, then who exactly am I? It sounds like a philosophical question. It is not. It is a deeply practical one, because for most baby boomers the answer to who are you has been the same for 40 or 50 years. You are what you do. You are the job title, the role, the function. That answer worked for a very long time. It built careers and raised families and held households together through difficult decades. But it is an answer that depends entirely on the doing continuing. And when the doing stops, when the last day of work arrives and the office empties and the schedule disappears, that answer no longer has anywhere to stand. What remains is not laziness. What remains is not relief. What remains for many baby boomers is a silence that feels uncomfortably close to inertia. To understand why this generation built their identity so completely around work and productivity, you have to go back to the world they were born into, not to romanticize it, just to see it clearly. Baby boomers grew up in households where adults worked. This sounds obvious until you think about what it actually looked like in practice. Fathers left early and came home late. Mothers, even those who stayed home, were never idle. There was always something being cleaned, cooked, mended, organized, managed. The house itself was a workplace, and the message embedded in every hour of it was consistent and unspoken. Productive people are valuable people. People who rest without having earned it are something else. There was no cultural counterweight to this message. Television showed busy families. Schools rewarded effort and output. Churches spoke of work as virtue, and the adults in these children's lives modeled, day after day, what a worthy person looked like. Someone always in motion, always useful, always carrying something. This was the first layer of coding. Not traumatic, not cruel, simply the water these children swam in, which is precisely why it went so deep. Then the 1970s arrived, and the coding went deeper still. The economy that had hummed reliably through the post-war years began to fracture. Inflation climbed in ways that changed the daily texture of family life. Grocery bills grew. Fathers who had felt secure began to look uncertain at the dinner table. Mothers who had not planned to work entered the workforce not by choice but by necessity. The comfortable assumption that effort produced security, that working hard meant you would be all right, was suddenly something that needed to be proven rather than assumed. For the children watching all of this, the lesson was not abstract. It arrived in the specific image of a father coming home, looking tired in a different way than before, in the specific sound of parents talking quietly after bedtime about numbers that did not add up, in the specific feeling of understanding without being told that the adults in your life were holding things together by working harder, not by working less. Stopping in that environment was not simply unproductive. Stopping was dangerous. Stopping was what happened before things fell apart. By the time these same children reached their 20s and 30s, the cultural environment had added one more layer. The 1980s did not invent the work ethic, but they glamorized it in ways that had never quite happened before. Productivity became not just a virtue but an identity marker. The people who worked the longest hours, who sacrificed the most, who built the most, these were the people the culture held up as models. Ambition was celebrated openly. Rest was, if not quite shameful, at least something you did not advertise. For baby boomers entering their prime working years, the message was already familiar. Work hard, be useful, keep going, the reward will come. And for many of them it did come. Careers were built, families were provided for, houses were bought and mortgages were paid. The identity built around productivity was not a delusion. It delivered real results across real decades, and that is exactly what makes it so difficult to put down. A woman in her mid-60s describes it this way, though she would never use these words herself. She says she does not know how to just be somewhere. Every room she enters, she immediately identifies what needs to be done in it. Every gathering she attends, she gravitates toward the kitchen or the task or the thing that needs organizing. When her children tell her to sit down, to relax, to let someone else handle it, she feels, beneath the smile she offers them, something close to panic. It is not that she loves washing dishes. It is not that she finds folding napkins particularly meaningful. It is that doing those things means she is contributing, and contributing means she belongs in the room, means she has a reason to be there, means she is not simply taking up space. She has never said any of this out loud, but it is there, operating quietly beneath every busy afternoon and every moment she cannot seem to sit still. The hands stay moving, because somewhere, a long time ago, still hands meant you were not enough. Here is what families often misunderstand when they watch this happen. They see a parent who cannot relax and conclude it is stubbornness. They see a husband or wife who keeps working past the point of necessity and assume it is about control or about not trusting others to do things properly or simply about habit too old to break. But they miss the deeper structure underneath. When a baby boomer cannot stop working, what is often happening is not a personality flaw and not a simple habit. What is happening is that their sense of self-worth is attached at a foundational level to their usefulness, and their usefulness, for most of their adult lives, has been demonstrated through work, through doing things, producing things, providing things, fixing things. Tell that person to stop working, and you have not, in their nervous system, simply suggested a pleasant change of pace. You have suggested that they become less, that they take up space without justifying it, that they exist without earning the right to exist, which is why the suggestion, however lovingly made, so often lands wrong. This is not irrationality. This is a perfectly logical response to 50 years of a particular kind of learning. The logic just happens to be one that no longer serves them as well as it once did. It is worth saying clearly what this work ethic built, because dismissing it as damage would be both inaccurate and unfair. The productivity that baby boomers brought to their working lives built real things. It kept families financially stable through decades that were not economically forgiving. It modeled for children what commitment and follow-through looked like in practice. The woman who cannot stop moving in the kitchen raised children who understood that love is expressed through effort. The man reorganizing his garage on Monday morning spent 40 years as the person his family could count on, and the security his family felt because of that is not a small thing. The strength that came from tying identity to productivity was genuine strength that produced genuine results across genuine decades. But genuine strength can carry a hidden cost, and for baby boomers, that cost has often looked like this: the vacation that never fully relaxed because the mind kept returning to unfinished tasks, the Sunday afternoon shadowed by a guilt that had no clear object, the retirement that arrived and brought, instead of peace, a restlessness with no obvious remedy, the moments with grandchildren or partners or old friends that were slightly less present than they could have been because some part of the mind was still at the desk, still at the workbench, still running the calculation of whether enough had been done today to justify the space being occupied. But quiet losses accumulate. There is a specific moment that many baby boomers describe, in different words but with the same essential shape. It is the moment, sometime in retirement or in the months leading up to it, when someone asks them what they have been up to, and they find, perhaps for the first time in their adult lives, that they do not have a ready answer. The job title is gone, the projects are finished or handed off. The role that organized the answer to that question for decades is no longer there to organize it. What fills that space is not always graceful. Sometimes it is a quiet withdrawal, a pulling back from social situations where that question might be asked. Sometimes it is simply a long pause before a vague answer. Fine, keeping busy, you know how it is, that reveals to anyone listening carefully that the person giving it is not entirely sure that is true. This is not failure. This is what happens when an identity built entirely around function meets a life stage that no longer requires the same function. The identity did not break. It simply arrived at a door it was not designed to open. What changes for the baby boomers who navigate this transition with the most steadiness is not that they stop working or stop being productive. Most of them never do, and perhaps they should not. The productivity is real. The capability is real. The satisfaction of making something or fixing something or contributing to something does not have to disappear with the job title. What changes is something more subtle. It is the slow, often uncomfortable process of separating the doing from the being, of recognizing that the value of a person is not the sum of their output, that a conversation with a grandchild is not less meaningful than a completed project, that the hands do not always have to be moving for the person attached to them to matter. This is not a lesson that arrives quickly. For a generation that spent 60 or 70 years learning the opposite, it tends to arrive slowly, in small moments, often without announcement. A morning when the garage stays closed and it turns out to be all right. An afternoon that passes without a task and leaves something behind that feels unexpectedly like rest. Not every baby boomer reaches that morning. Some keep moving until they cannot, and there is a kind of dignity in that too. But for those who begin to sense that the busyness has become its own kind of avoidance, a way of not sitting with questions that the quiet would bring, the recognition itself is something, not a solution, but a beginning. The man in the garage on Monday morning will probably keep reorganizing his tools for a while. That is all right. The tools get reorganized, the morning passes, and something in him feels settled in a way that is hard to explain to people who did not grow up in the same world he did. But there are moments, increasingly, when he closes the garage door before the job is finished, when he walks back into the house, not because everything is done, but because he decided that enough was done, when he sits at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his wife and does not reach for something to fix. Those moments are small. They do not look like much from the outside, but for someone who spent a lifetime believing that stillness was something to be earned, they are not small at all. If you recognize this in yourself or in someone you love, what was the moment you first noticed that the working had become something more than work? Leave it in the comments. Those stories matter more than you might think. If this kind of honest, unhurried look at the psychology of your generation is something you want more of, staying around for the next one would mean a great deal.